Good morning on this Sunday, February 16th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Lawmakers are ready to get back to work on the state budget. We take a look at what's ahead. The AJC reports the current chief procurement officer for the city of Atlanta is under investigation for an alleged inappropriate relationship with his executive assistant. And state lawmakers get ready to debate the bill that would allow child placement agencies to turn away parents who don't match their religious or moral beliefs. Aaron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Lawmakers are set to return to the state capitol on Tuesday after a break in this year's session to work on the budget. This week, the governor reiterated his commitment to another pay raise for teachers despite cuts to the budget.
I believe this well-deserved pay raise will go a long way to incentivizing our best and brightest to stay in the classroom.
Governor Brian Kemp says Georgia has a serious teacher retention problem, and speaking during a visit to McEachern High School Thursday, he doubled down on his promise to increase their pay. The governor's proposed budget includes a $2,000 bump for teachers across the state, the second and final installment of his $5,000 pay increase, which was a campaign promise. Kemp's remarks come the same week the General Assembly scheduled more hearings to take a closer look at the budget.
I think the teacher pay raise is still something that we're taking a look at in the House. That's a big ticket, frankly.
The governor's office estimates the teacher raises would cost about $360 million next year. As Aaron, you spend a lot of time down at the state capitol, so what do you think we can expect when legislators head back this week?
I think you can expect a lot more negotiations. The one good news for us as Georgians is that the lawmakers are actually talking. I mean, they've gotten past sort of a public display of dissension. Now they're actually getting in closed doors. They're actually having everyone sort of give their reports, and they're talking about different ways to balance the budget. And so I think when we go back into session next week, you will see a sort of collaborative effort to put forth a plan that hopefully most legislators can agree on. But the good news, again, is that while there's still differences, I want to be clear, and the pay raise for teachers is definitely up for debate. The Speaker wants to make sure that his House members have an opportunity to promote some things that they want to promote. But the good news is that they're talking, the conversations have been civil, and hopefully we can get some results pretty soon.
Well, Phil, I know that the Speaker was actually talking a lot about, this tax cut that he also had to make good on a campaign promise. We learned this week that it possibly could cost the state $615 million. That's a big hit on top of the 4% cut this year, the 6% cut next year. What's going to happen here?
Well, that is a big hit, and I think that was a good analysis. They finally are talking. They're finally getting proper information to do the budget, and I hope that we'll have a lot of this resolved next week. As I said last week, though, I think the legislature is going to have to decide between the promised tax cut and the promised governor's extra raise. The teachers got, of course, $3,000 last year. I would think that maybe let's have a promise to the teachers for the $2,000 next year and do the tax cut. That would be my preference. But again, I'm glad that finally, I think this pause was needed. We talked a little bit about this last week because we're doing the people's business.
Yeah. Janelle, a good idea to have that pause?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was good for just everyone to take a moment. I think the biggest thing goes back to communication. That's one of the things we talked about, is just making sure that we are communicating why we need the tax cuts and then why we are advocating for additional funds for teachers.
Kathy, weigh in here on this budget process. You've had a lot to say over the past couple of weeks.
Well, it's good they're talking because there's a lot to talk about. I think this thought of a further tax cut's ridiculous. I don't think that there's anything more we can tax on the spend side, and we can cut on the spend side to compensate for any further tax cuts. And it was something that was done as a political giveaway, and it's really gotten the Republican leadership in trouble.
Okay. We want to kind of switch gears now and do an update on what we call Senate race number 2. On Friday, Senator Kelly Loeffler and Governor Brian Kemp touring one of Georgia's top pro-life women's pregnancy centers together. This week, Senator Loeffler got the endorsement of former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. We should also mention Congressman Doug Collins received the endorsement of former Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee. Janelle, first of all, do these endorsements matter? You can disclose.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So as I disclosed last time, I am in support of Senator Loeffler. I'm a honorary co-chair on her campaign. And these endorsements do say a lot. It means that, Senator Loeffler has done a great job of navigating these shark-infested waters, right? Let's just be clear about that. She has aligned herself with the president fairly well. She has definitely racked up endorsements. I think it shows a lot. I think right now I'm confident that she is finding her voice, that she is also going to find a unique issue that speaks to her skill sets as well as her background, her professional background. So I think this is great for her.
Theron, with so much attention being played, to Congressman Doug Collins and also Kelly Loeffler, Democrats, what's going on the Democratic side? Because we're not hearing much.
Yeah, I think that they're raising money. You've got 3 people who have said that they want to run. I mean, 2 declared. I don't know if State Senator Ed Tarver has kind of officially kicked off his campaign yet. But what I'm hearing on the Democratic side is that Mr. Lieberman is continuing to take his message to voters. I think Pastor Warnock is going to plan to do some events here coming up soon, and I think you'll see something from Ed Tarver. But I do want to say that I think that while endorsements play a key role, but the one endorsement in this Republican sort of situation is really who is President Trump going to throw his support behind. And while you've seen, both candidates try to cozy up to him, but let's not underestimate Mike Huckabee. I mean, this is a person who ran unsuccessfully for president, but also he had a very, very well-watched Fox News TV show that a lot of conservatives listen to. And so I think you're starting to see both candidates trying to pick up endorsements that align themselves with different Republican factions amongst the party.
Phil, weigh in here because Mike Huckabee is popular among conservatives. Newt Gingrich is very popular among conservatives here in Georgia.
Well, it's all one big family of conservatives, and we all have our favorites. We all have our favorites, just like the left-wingers have their favorites. I do think the most important endorsement, I don't think most of the endorsements mean anything. I do think President Trump's endorsement does mean a lot. We talked about this last week. The president, for now, is wisely staying neutral. He had his famous comments that we discussed that he really doesn't want the 2 running in November, and he's going to figure something out. And I think this is still being discussed at the highest levels at the White House. And I have to laugh, though, at the Democrats because it shows the deep split between the more center-left Democrats and the radicals like Raphael Warnock. Ed Tarver, it'll be interesting to see how this divides. Ed Tarver is truly a center-left person that has reasonable, though liberal, proposals, whereas Warnock is, I think, for the Green New Deal and tax hikes. Kathy, I got to laugh. You don't want to give taxpayer money back to the taxpayers at all, do you? I mean, what's wrong with
you can't give it all back, Phil, and still deliver services.
Tax cuts?
Well, I do want to pick up here on the presidential politics because you can't ignore it going on here in Georgia. Congressman Lucy McBath endorsed Michael Bloomberg for president, Kathy. Many weren't surprised because of his stances on gun control. Will we see even more Georgians, do you think, follow suit? He's blanketing the airwaves here in Georgia. What's his play here?
Well, Congresswoman McBath was an employee of Everytown, the gun policy group of Michael Bloomberg, and so that doesn't come as a surprise. I think she's done a great job with her campaign and her service in the time that she's been there. So it's significant that she would make this endorsement. I think Bloomberg, his investment here is going to show up. I think we're going to see more and more people, but I think the real test is going to be when we have the presidential primary.
McBath needs the money too, doesn't she? She's struggling. It's a competitive district.
Well, let's not forget that he also endorsed her campaign and gave her a lot of money last time she ran. So, and then she's just paying him back. She's giving back what he gave to her, which I think is probably the best example of quid pro quo, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to put back on that. There's no quid pro quo here. I mean, we don't talk about the countless amount of money that Republican organizations give to Republicans, and then they turn around and endorse them. And so this is not no quid pro quo. This is a woman who beat Karen Handel, who both of you all support, on her own, with some help from Mike Bloomberg organizations.
A lot of help.
No, but my point is, let's not talk about the millions of dollars that went to Karen Handel from other organizations as well. So I don't want to understate the significance of this endorsement from a congresswoman who's running a good campaign, who's doing a good job, just because someone chose to give her campaign some money. And let's not forget, this woman's son was murdered, and so at least Mike Bloomberg. And no other Republican is talking about this in Georgia, is trying to do something about gun violence, and he's trying to encourage people to take true gun responsibility ownership, and when they're basically, you know, exercising their Second Amendment. And so I just don't think there was no quid pro quo. It was the right thing for her to do.
Well,
One question. I want to ask Theron one quick question on this, because that tape that came out this week that Michael Bloomberg made just about 5 years ago is rather recently. Can the American Democratic African American voters, can they throw their support, considering what he said about stop and frisk, that he really supported it, but then the comments he made about African American youth, that they, you know, they are the murderers?
Well, African Americans should not be the only one that is actually concerned about the words that he used. All Americans should be concerned about this. Now, it definitely targeted young African American men, and the bottom line is that Mike Bloomberg is going to not only have to apologize. You know, my pastor tells me is that it's one thing to ask for forgiveness, but do you actually show forgiveness through your deeds and your actions going forward? Now, there are some things he can turn to where he's spent money to basically help the African American population, but at the end of the day, I think this conversation is going to have to.
But will that hurt McBath is the question.
No, it doesn't hurt.
I think it will.
It doesn't. No. Well, I'm black, you're white, so I think I got a little bit better opportunity.
I thought you said all of us should be weighing in on this. You have great insights just because you're black.
Let him finish, and then the last word right there.
The undertone is that there was a prior consistent relationship there between Mike Bloomberg and Congresswoman McBath. I would tell you that I think that she's concerned, like all of us, about the comments that he made. What I'm saying is that let's not make it that black people need to be worried about what he said. I think everyone needs to be worried about what he said. And more importantly, hold on, let me finish. I just think that the Bloomberg campaign has got to put Mr. Bloomberg out to the public to let him explain, not necessarily what he said 3 or 5 years ago, but how does he feel now, and how is he going to work on a true decarceration plan for America?
All right, I got to get out. Coming up, the AJC is reporting the city of Atlanta is investigating its chief of procurement for an alleged inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Lots to discuss on this one coming up.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
He was brought in to reform the reputation of the city of Atlanta's procurement department. Now the AJC reports procurement chief David Wilson is the subject of an internal investigation for an alleged inappropriate relationship with his executive assistant, who operates a sexually oriented side business. Now, she has denied any type of romantic relationship with Wilson. Kathy, Sunday morning show, so we're not going into all of the details. True. But let's talk about, of all people, the chief procurement officer, the subject of an internal investigation. We don't know the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think the investigation is just going to have to, you know, take its course, and because there's conflicting stories on both sides of what happened. But it would seem to me that if you were in charge of the procurement department, that you would work very, very hard to make sure that you've, you know, vetted everyone and that your department is going well. And that's a mess that is unfortunate.
Phil, the legislature's back in town this week, you know, looking at possibility and talking about a state takeover of the airport.
Right. Well, that's correct, and I have to say that you had started by saying he was trying to help the reputation of the procurement department. It was in tatters even before all this tawdriness came out that that we're talking about. So what's going to happen? We haven't seen any real reforms yet. There's been some transparency. Yes, there's an inspector general, but there's still, how many indictments? Oh yes, 12 indictments and convictions over the last year because of contracting and bribery. The federal investigation, as we know, is going. So this is just, where's the extreme vetting of these people, by the way, by the city administration?
Well, in another shocking story, the driver of an SUV in Cedartown who allegedly hit a man riding a bike left the scene and called his friend, State Rep Trey Kelly, who then called the police chief. Now, no one called 911 for more than an hour, according to the AJC. The pedestrian later died. Now, all three men said they thought an animal was hit and not a pedestrian. So, I mean, lots to kind of digest here. Theron, you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, this is very unfortunate. I mean, there's a lot of details, but bottom line is that I think that whenever you have someone who needs help, you know, someone who's had an accident, and we just really don't know what was going through the minds of the people that were involved. There is a state legislator involved in this, and so that kind of escalates the political sensitivity to this, but also we got to really figure out what proper procedures follow. So a lot to come out on this story, but it's a very sad outcome.
And Janelle, of course, we're hearing about calls for Trey Kelly's resignation now.
Yeah, I don't know. I personally am one that do believe in due process, so I'm not one to ever call for anyone's resignation prior to us finding out what exactly happened. But I will say that I think what this shows, though, is that even though we all have personal relationships, but you have to stick to the proper processes, and just to be safe, because you never know. I mean, there really could have been, a lot of just confusion or, just what you thought was happening, an assumption, but, a man's life has been taken. So we have to check in to see what's going on with that.
All right, very serious allegations there. Well, the Department of Public Safety Commissioner Mark Mcdonough resigned this week after a meeting with Governor Brian Kemp, saying the cheating scandal involving 30 newly hired state troopers played a role in the decision. Phil, I mean, he held this post for quite a while.
Well, he did, and it was an outrage what happened with the cheating scandal, and I think the governor realized it was time to get new blood. He was, I think, it's the longest serving in that position that we've had in modern Georgia history, and so I think it's a good thing. I hope we don't have a website where we get 500 applications, but I hope we get somebody good to lead the state patrol.
Kathy, did the governor have a choice really in this matter?
Probably not. I mean, you have to dismiss an entire class because of decisions that were made about how the testing was done. Somebody has to take responsibility for it. So that was probably the right decision.
All right, well, coming up, a religious freedom bill that centers on adoption agencies is introduced in the Georgia Senate. We discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Well, Georgia senators could soon debate a bill that would allow adoption agencies to turn away parents who don't have similar religious or moral beliefs. Now, critics are calling this a license to discriminate aimed at the LGBTQ community. Phil, I want to get your take on this one first.
Well, there's plenty of agencies that can handle this, and yes, there are some traditional religious agencies that I think we ought to respect here in this state, the sincerity of someone's faith. And so if you don't want to go to that agency, don't go to that agency. And I think it's pretty clear in that area. I'm tired of seeing traditional religious institutions under attack and called bigots and all of this. This is not bigotry.
Kathy, supporters of this bill say, 10% of the adoption agencies have some type of Christian value to them, that there are 90% of the other adoption agencies are available to other couples who may not have the same religious or moral views. How do you respond to that?
Well, the challenge we have in this state is that we have a very clear constitutional mandate not to use state funds for religious purposes. It's clear. It's in the Constitution. And so the agencies that they're trying to help here are agencies that receive state funding, but yet are discriminating against different kinds of taxpayers when they try to adopt children out of our foster care and adoption system. We have 12,000 kids at least in the system right now looking for homes. We can't, and we've got budget cuts going on nonstop. We can't afford to spend money on agencies that are not going to be fully open to people who want to get these kids into permanent homes.
Theron, does this have the possibility of blowing up into a big religious freedom fight?
Well, I hope not, because at the end of the day, we don't want to have this conversation about the state and the business of rewarding or giving licenses to businesses or agencies to discriminate. And I agree with Kathy. I think that's the very very subtle but specific take we got to take on this issue, because what we don't need at a time when we know there's a lot of things pending, where I know that Republicans and Democrats, but mostly Republicans, want to be able to get back to their districts quickly and be able to campaign on issues that they were able to get done with healthcare, education, and jobs. And so I do think you'll see someone step in both parties and really try to say, okay, let's make sure that this is something that we want to do. But we also got to just keep in mind that if this goes the direction it's headed, it could really, really cause some uproar in our community.
Janelle, is this an issue that Republicans should be taking up this session? I
don't know if I can say it should be taken up this session. I will say, though, that it goes both ways, though. We can't, force pastors to do things and that they are not spiritually inclined to do, as well as we can't force, government agencies either to, impact their ability to do their job as well. So I think we have to be careful when it comes to how we're regulating people in general. And then let's just keep the children in mind, because there are a lot of children, as Kathy stated, that are in foster care who are looking for homes. And I honestly feel as though what they care about is being in a safe home that is protected and loved and provided for. So as long as we are issuing that to these families, to these children, I think that's the main thing that we should keep in focus.
That's the bottom line. All right, thanks, Janelle. Phil, I want to switch gears and talk about the Cobb County Sheriff. There's some new developments that the AJC was reporting about his corn boiling. Did I say that right?
You did.
I'm getting there. But he was talking about, this is a political fundraiser that also raises money for a children's museum in Cobb County. But there's some accusations now that the money didn't get to the Cobb County Museum and that some of the county employees were actually working on the taxpayer dime to prepare for this.
Yes, and that's why you have a rejuvenated ethics committee that'll be looking into this. They've already asked for records. I didn't go last year. I've been to these corn boilings. They're advertised both as a campaign fundraiser and as helping the Children's Museum, which I do know the Children's Museum has gotten a lot of money in the past from this charitable effort. I think it's been overblown by the liberal Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They don't like Sheriff Warren. He's a tough law and order guy. I mean, there's a bunch of people that the ethics committee are looking at, Democrats, liberals. The AJC doesn't focus on all of these people and put them on the front page. I think Sheriff Warren's going to have to pay some modest fines and move on.
Well, I think the city of Atlanta would disagree with Phil on that one. But Darren, I want to ask you, because some of the folks are saying, well, I had no idea that this was a political fundraiser. I just thought the money was going to the Cobb County, the Children's Museum. So there was kind of an issue with the messaging that the AJC reached out and talked to some of the folks who were involved in it. So is this an optics issue as well?
It is an optics issue, and I want to agree with Phil. I do know that the ethics department, they are investigating a lot of different people, but I do think that we got to be specific that this has been an ongoing investigation with new information, because when I'm on the show and there's new information, breaking news about FAA and airport stuff, I mean, we got to treat this the same way. And I think the new information is that once the people were contacted about the funds that they were donating to this organization's charitable event, they had no idea where the money was really going. So it is an ongoing investigation. He is innocent until proven guilty, but it definitely does not look good for the sheriff that this investigation is continuing to go on at a time when he's trying to run for re-election.
Kathy, last word?
It's really, really clear that government employees cannot be used in anything related to fundraising or campaigning for a candidate. Clear as day. If there's, if there's any kind of murkiness about where money's going or whatever, that perhaps is one thing. But the use of employees on anything related to a campaign is just simply not permitted. And I hope they throw the book at him.
Well, the Ethics Commission will look at some of these blurred lines, and we will find out what the outcome will be soon. Probably end of April.
He'll probably just be issued like a parking ticket.
Coming up, we will have winners and losers. Everyone, stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I just want to go first real quick. My winner this week, Robert Green from Holland & Knight, who invited me to the Atlanta Trend Luncheon. Atlanta Trend is just a group of 2,000 business leaders in Metro Atlanta. They really get together. They learn from each other. It was just a really great event, so thank you for that invitation. Phil, we'll go to you.
Well, I've got a winner, and we lost a great educator this past week. It was Betty Siegel. She was the longtime president from 1981 to 2006 of Kennesaw State University. I think she was the longest-serving college president, maybe the longest-serving female college president in the country. She was a pillar and really grew that university. Clarence Thomas, our Supreme Court Justice, was at the dedication of the new judicial building in downtown Atlanta, named after Governor Nathan Deal, and rightly so. And I want to give a shout out to my friends up in LJ in North Georgia. They had me up for a luncheon Thursday. They proclaimed it Phil Kent Day. A tear came to my eye because they love the show.
Great.
And Janelle, we got to get you up there. They like the conservative voice that I've been doing.
Can I come as well?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you for watching. Okay, Darren.
My first winner is definitely going to be Herman J. Russell. There's a release of the Herman J. Russell story, and I just want to say for our viewers, it's called Building Atlanta. It goes all the way back to when Mr. Russell was a kid, a shoe shine stand, and it's going to air on ATL PBA this Sunday evening at 9 p.m. and also on Channel 16 with Comcast and Channel 30 with AT&T Uverse. And then real quickly, I didn't get a chance to weigh in on the David Wilson situation, Chief Procurement Officer. I just want our viewers to know that this is an ongoing investigation. I know that the administration is taking this very, very, very seriously. And so stay tuned. I think Mayor Bottoms is doing her best to try to get to the bottom of this, and she will be making a statement.
All right, Janelle.
Awesome. And so in honor of Black History Month, I didn't do anything last week, and I want to make sure I do that. I would like to make Miguel Wilson my winner this week. He is not only an excellent suit and design maker, my husband's tailor, but he spearheaded the creation of the Morehouse Polo team, and they received official notice from the United States Polo Association, their membership in the organization. I thought that was awesome. And then shout out to viewers Andre and Tamisha Lawson. They are fans of the show. They actually really love you, Phil. So so shout out to them for watching.
It's quite the love fest between you two. All right, it is Valentine's Day weekend.
Well, I just want to say February 24th is the deadline to register to vote for the Georgia presidential primary. It's coming right up on us, so please go to the Secretary of State's website and make sure you're registered, and if you're not, get on it.
That's a good reminder. And also to the fine folks at the Catoosa County Chamber of Commerce who invited me and Theron up to speak at their monthly meeting about the census. So just a reminder that Census Day is also coming up on April 1st, 2020. So thank you all so much for watching. We will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.